Hello, friend. This is Legal Design Thinking in real life, a weekly live provided by Lawyers Design School. And happy to have you joining us today. My name is Hannele Korhonen and I'm the founder of Lawyers Design School. And today I'm thrilled to welcome Rob Waller as my guest. He's a highly accomplished information designer, researcher, and educator. And for me, and I'm sure that for many other people as well, kind of the go-to source in the area of information design applied to contract simplification. So, Rob, it's great to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
But hey, let's get started with the business, so to say. Let's start with your story. I know that you have prepared some slides for us. So, would you like to pull them up, or how would you like to
yes, slides,
start with your story?
Yes, sure. I'll. Yeah, the first slide. Sorry about the hesitation here, but I hadn't got my story in the slide. Now I have. So I will start off with a few slides. I've just got a little introduction to myself. Hope you can see that. And then I'll show a few examples and some ideas which we can then discuss. So
we don't see the slides yet. So I think
that I've done it. Here we go.
Yes, perfect.
There we go. And sorry for that.
Yes.
Okay. So yes, I'm an information designer, and I'm now actually pretty much retired from quite a long career in the field. Still working and doing some teaching. But I started originally. I was trained as a graphic designer, but I was particularly interested in the relationship between language and design, and designing things that mattered, designing things that really contributed to life rather than simply selling things at the time. And this was in the 1970s. When you left design school, you tended to go into something like advertising or marketing, and I didn't really want to do that. I got this very interesting job at the Open University in the UK, which was one of the first universities to teach purely at a distance. And we had a research group there looking at how people learn from text. So I worked there with a psychologist and a linguist in the field of educational technology. And I did that for about 15 years, and I developed theories and ideas. Eventually stopped and started a design agency in about 1989, which I ran for a number of years with a colleague, David Lewis. And this was bought by WPP in the end, which was one of the big global branding design agencies. And we were working at that time for lots of household names, people like Vodafone or Barclays Bank and so forth. Then I left and I went back to research and teaching at the University of Reading, where I was a professor of information design. And I started a research group called the Simplification Centre, which then, when I left the university, became an educational charity. And I still run that, and our main activity is the information design summer school, and Hannele has been on that.
Yes.
And I'll tell you about that in a minute. Did you enjoy it, Hannele?
Very, very much.
Good. Yeah, so this year, Hannele was on, it always used to be face-to-face in Bath in the UK. And then we had to go online during COVID, and that's when Hannele did it. And we're going back to face-to-face this year with a 3-day summer school in Vienna, starting on May the 22nd, I think it is. So I'm going to go into some ideas now, just to give you a bit of background about my thinking.
Yes,
and hope there's something useful for you.
Can I ask one thing about your story? You said that in the 70s you were not so interested in the commercial work, but then you ended up kind of establishing a design agency after all. What was the kind of the change there? Or
well, I didn't really happen? Yeah, after a while I stopped enjoying the academic life, and I did a PhD while I was working at the Open University. And when I'd finished it, I basically had said everything I wanted to say, and I didn't really have anything anything more to research and say at that time. I was kind of exhausted and I wanted to change. So the agency that we ran, Information Design Unit, it was obviously commercial, but we were quite biased towards information rather. The motive was informing people rather than selling to them and persuading them. And when we were acquired by WPP, it was because they were building a multidisciplinary agency. So they wanted information design there. So, for example, they were doing all the branding for Vodafone, the mobile phone company. And we were designing their phone bills, their instructions, their user guides, and things like that. So it was a more complete service for them. And for us, the idea was that we would get introductions to clients more easily. It didn't altogether work that way, but it was interesting, and it was an exit route from a company that we'd started and that had got a little bit big, and we didn't know quite how to ever leave it. So it's always a problem when you start a business. What is your exit?
Exactly.
Okay, just very briefly, here's a relatively small project I did a few years ago for Hasbro Games, who are the publishers of Monopoly. And this is the instructions as they used to be, probably until the 1960s or 70s. I'm not quite sure how late. But this seems to me to be not that unlike a business contract. It's the rules of the game, and it's also a rather ruthless and unkind game of Monopoly, which basically discards all the players in turn until one wins. And our redesign of it came to this. So it's quite a contrast, isn't it? Instead of somebody sitting and reading out all the rules to you and then you start to play, as a child, that was desperately boring. What you really want to do is set up a game and start playing. So we've done a graphic set of instructions for the game, and then we've just told you how to play, what the aim is, who goes first, and then we've basically said, have a go, start playing. Now there's another page I haven't got a slide of here, which is I would call a reference page. So this is that when you land, you have a go, you land somewhere, and then you go and look up where you've landed and what your choices are at that time. So we've got, I'm going to come to layering in a minute. And so we've got an action layer, set it up and play. We've got an explanation, a diagram, and a set of instructions on the right. And then we've got a reference layer that you go and check when you need extra information. Now, I'm very keen on customer journeys. And this is a customer journey for the Monopoly game. As you open it up, you set it up, you start, and then you've got what I would call business as usual. It's your turn and other people's turns. And then we end the game, or we have a crisis. So at each one of these stages, we have different information needs. What is it? What do I do? And so forth. And that means the designer's brief is different. It's about the box and the name at the startup phase, and then you go all the way through to reference notes for how do you get out of trouble. And this idea you can apply to all sorts of different journeys, including the journey of setting up a business contract and running it. Couple of case studies. This is one, a purely speculative one I did when this arrived in our home. This is quite old now. This is 2008, but it's an old favorite of mine. And it sort of gets across what we're trying to do very, very well. So this arrives, and we've never seen anything like this before. Reading it carefully, the biggest thing it says is, do not ignore this notice, which is always a sign that people are ignoring it. Turns out that somebody drove in a bus lane, tut tut, and this is the penalty. And if you read it carefully, you find the more you delay, the more it costs. And you're allowed to dispute it, and there's instructions about how to pay, and there's a bit more on the back. So it's nothing we've seen before. We can't rely on knowing how to read this kind of document, and it also doesn't even work functionally. It doesn't take us through the argument. So we redesigned it like this, or I redesigned it like this, and now it tells the story down the left. In fact, It's designed for what I would call strategic reading. You read down the left, and then you move to the right when you want more information. It gives you the evidence, and it expresses the penalty as a sort of consumer choice. If you pay by these dates, you pay this amount. So we've also can introduce a concept of affordances, which is a design concept that's particularly important. We've got these sequences, we've got the choice, we've got cut here, that dotted line, we've got mail me, and look here first. Now, interestingly, we then showed this to the local authority in our area, and they didn't like it. And one reason they confessed was that they wouldn't get as much money in because people were always late in paying. So the other thing was they thought they had to quote the regulations all the time. And so what we've done is do a user guide to the notice, which actually has all the legal background to everything there. So this is an example of what I would call layering, and I'll go on and say a bit more about that.
Yeah, and so just to say that is a typical example of the authority thinking that you have to give the kind of the legal information, but the user only needs the information to pay.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just the legal information; it was they wanted us to directly quote the language of the Act of Parliament. Exactly. And sorry, my presentation has a mind of its own here. It's going on its own here, but essentially we've got these three layers of an action layer of the headlines. We've got an explanation layer which says more, and then the reference layer, which is all the detail, which is only for motivated people, is in the notes. I'm going to whip on a bit fast because we haven't got very much time today. And so you can read these as filters, basically, that you can stop reading at any point. And this saves time. It means you only read the level of detail that you really need. Here's another example. So this is for registering to be a voter. And it's just extraordinary how many words and how chaotic they are here. And if you think of literacy levels in most countries, and particularly, well, we're worse in the UK than you are in Finland. People will absolutely struggle with this and not send it in or make errors. So what we've done here is done a new form, and it's got the action layer. It says what it's about. It's got essential explanations only. We've only pulled in the notes exactly where they're relevant and found space for them. Then all the rest is online if you really need to go and read the rules and the law about who's eligible. I'm going to whip through this very fast because of time. This is a case study we did for Shell, and I think this has been shown in this forum before, hasn't it, by others? But I want to get to some explanation of how we did it. So this is the wall of text. This is the user guide kind of version that we did. And the outcome of this was negotiation time for sales was drastically reduced. It won an award. So we have affordances here as well, where you read down these and you read in if you need to. We've got bold headings, so you can see where sections start. And we've got, so it's become a user guide, as in this user guide over here, using all those conventions. So the prototype, the process we went through was to produce quite provocative prototypes where we reduced things to, in some cases, one word. There was some question about, are we liable for blah, 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 blah? And our answer was no. And this was provocatively short. We didn't end up with that level of simplicity, but you can see the kind of thing. This challenged the client to think, yeah, do you know what? Do we really need to say all that in capital letters down there? Can we not just say claims against Shell cannot exceed the sale price? So that's the layering, and we've done a workshop about this as well with the client, with lawyers and product people and sales people, and started to sketch ideas. And
how did you get those product and business people involved? Because
Well,
many lawyers are saying that they don't get the
yes.
business people in the workshops, even though they invite them.
Well, actually, it was the people who it was the contracting department, I think, who called us in, and we asked them to bring lawyers in, and also somebody from a part of the business where they wanted to prototype these. They wanted to try this out with a particular business, which was to do with ships and marine lubricants. And so we just asked for these people to be there, and they came along, and it was all fine. And so out of the workshop came this idea of an information architecture, which layered it according to the audience. So we just decided that all the things in the contract, which were to do with placing your order and paying for it and accepting it onto your ship, were in one place, because those really needed to be understood by the people in the ship. You know, if they didn't get there on time for it, or if they didn't pay, or whatever it would be. And in the middle, there's things which are not so much relevant for them, but for management. This is about liabilities. And on the right are all the things which really none of those people in the business are very interested in. They're not very interested in governing law or trademarks, but they have to be there apparently. And so in the documents, they're in small print. So you can see how we've got sections for these three audiences, and we've gone to 3 columns, traditional legal sort of, you know, it's not very inviting. It has low affordance, you might say, affordance being the quality of showing you how to use it and encouraging you to use it. And there's a question and answer format, and there's something I call graphic editing. This came from my colleague David Lewis. He used to use that term when we had the company. So this is where you take something like this, and you here it's the same text, but we've added these questions. The text otherwise hasn't changed, and we've added a graphic where we can. And here's another one where we've got a flow chart to explain the process. And we've got a key alert. It's not so much a question there, but just something you need to bear in mind. And here's a sort of extreme example where we've taken the Incoterms as a model, and it has shown in specifically where, at what point in transferring the goods, you take over the risk from Shell.
Do you still consider that as graphic editing when you're using more about illustrations or visualizations? Is that still graphic editing in your thinking?
It's quite rare that you get to do it this much, actually. I find very few examples where you can do quite so much. But I think it's important not to think of legal information design as just visualization. I think it's a lot to do with writing and to bring layout into your writing. And actually, the next example I can show you, this was from a workshop for a part of the EU. And here's an EU directive, and you can't see what it's about. You really can't see what it's about. If you do that, now you can see what it's about. So a little tiny transformation like that makes a huge difference. So once you've done that, I gave them this example, and we were trying to find ways of, you know, we haven't got time to go through it, but if I do that, you can immediately see where the joins are in this paragraph. It's this or this, as well as this and this or this in the case of this. And then you can use these, if you spot these, as cues to start being more graphic. So this is about what information you have to give to consumers about changes in price. And so we've got these circumstances where it's a straightforward, the price is known, or where the price isn't calculated in advance, or where it's a subscription. So now let's actually explain that, put headings in, and immediately it's better. And then we can start. So now we're now in plain language with big headings. Now we can start. Now let's go back and put those headings back in the original. That's the original with headings. It's a bit better, not really as good as it could be. now we've put the headings at the side so we can read down them. And now we can turn it into a 2x2 matrix. And so graphic editing is looking for these structures in the text. And all these alternatives, now I've turned them into FAQs, which is what we did with Shell. And I've added examples so that it brings it to life. And now we try visualization. And for me, I don't think the visualization is the strongest one. I think possibly I like the examples, but I also like the matrix.
That's so brilliant, because text is always visual, whether or not you do it deliberately or not.
Yeah, and actually these things are quite hard to do. Graphic actual visualizations are hard to do. You've got to know what you're doing, and it's not very flexible if you want to change it. One more example, official writing. This is where we talk about a reliance on precedents and the need to quote regulations and piling on more and more content. And I have some examples here. So this is government letters about social benefits, where people were getting these things spewing out of a computer, more and more stuff added to it. So we turned it into modules that they, excuse me a moment, that they could assemble. So now we've got really a kind of action, explanation, reference structure to this. See how it drills down from the headlines on the front page to how we worked out your benefits. So this is for people with often relatively poor literacy, to try and talk them through the argument, so that you can sit with them as well and say, well, this means this. There we go. The action layer is seeing the topic at a glance, and then the explanation layer is the short letter, and then the reference layer drills down to various other things which are separated out, whereas before they were just in one long rambling narrative. Oh yes, sorry, I wanted to finish with the summer school, but if you wanted to talk about this before we move on, happy to do that.
Yeah, just maybe to ask what has been the kind of the results from the users or feedback from users after doing this.
Well, it's worked pretty well. I don't have exact data because it's not always shared. But one thing that does happen, I'll stop showing this and I want to share another one instead. It's that you find that there's a kind of deterioration that, let's see where it's gone. Yeah, so here we've got a few years later, so that's quite a long time ago. Can you see this one okay?
Yes, yeah.
You'll see that essentially the writing has gone terrible. The big headings, is one big heading at the top. This is a template. But we've got sentences like, in addition to this, we're currently developing a further enhancement to our statement service, and we'll be able to provide you with an indicative illustration based on new state pension rules. I mean, this is not plain English at all. And even though they've had guidelines and so on, and so we were brought back in, and at this point that's another one. We're trying to set them up with modules now. So now they have these little modules about how to contact us, and a particular thing called passport to benefits I won't explain, and how to get help, topic headings, payment summaries, calculations, boilerplate, and these are standard little bits of text which we couldn't change. And then we showed them how they could assemble these into letters. And not sort of freelance and start writing nonsense. And so this was just really an effort in, I think, about 5 or 6 years after the other one to kind of restore it.
Because it's so difficult for people to actually change the way they
it's difficult.
Always
and so here, by the way, it's being responsive. So we're now doing it on iPads and smartphones.
Yeah.
I'll stop sharing now, because actually what you've just said about how hard it is exactly why we started the Information Design Summer School. So the summer school is really designed for people who need this in their workplace, who need to know about layering, or we didn't have time to talk about design patterns and other things, and the basics of information architecture and customer journeys and so on. You can't just dive in and sort of try and do it, because you don't really know what you're trying to do. It's like trying to build a house without building the foundations. So the summer school, though it's very short, it's a week in Bath or wherever, and now it's down to 3 days this year. It's the idea is it's a kind of a sushi belt, and things go past you of ideas that you can grab and books you can go and read yourself and so on, just to kind of lay out the field, because it's quite hidden actually. We don't get a lot of it in our education, and it's quite hard to do. It's quite hard to make visual judgments. It takes a long time for people trained for 4 years in art school, and when they used to come and work for me, it took 6 months or a year before you were really confident. It is quite deep and quite difficult, because it's kind of aesthetic, but it's also intellectual, and it's making judgments, and it's having empathy, and it's letting go of your first idea, and that's quite hard for creative people actually to do that, or for any of us. And so the summer school is designed as this march past this sushi belt of concepts. And as you know, we have things called theory cards. So we use these little flashcards of key theories, and I mentioned affordance today. That's just one of them, and there's 28 or 29 of those cards. So people coming to the summer school, we got a lot of lawyers. Last time it was about 30% lawyers, but we also get civil servants. We've had medics, doctors, people in nursing with their last time. We have engineers, teachers, textbook writers, all sorts of people, and we have graphic designers, and we have plain language writers who want to come in and find out more about what, for the designers, what information design is about, rather than just graphic design, and for the writers, how they can make their work more graphic. So that's the summer school.
I can highly recommend. It was a wonderful experience.
So just look up Information Design Summer School or Simplification Centre, and you'll find it.
Hey, there's one question in the chat for you. Someone is asking, did you usually user test the design during the design process?
Yes, well, we try to. It's actually pretty hard to user test some of the things we do realistically. So, for example, if we're designing, and I've done a lot of things to do with gas bills, electricity bills, that kind of thing, where you want people to understand them, to avoid them having to phone up and ask the question and all the rest of it. So you can use a test in the sense of telling people you're user testing. You have them come to a place. They'll talk about it with you. You can. I like what I call what's called protocol testing or read aloud testing, where you get them to read and think aloud and articulate what they're thinking, and that's quite a good way of spotting the errors or why they're making errors, what the thinking is behind it. But it's very artificial. They know they're evaluating something, and they're trying to please you. They'll often say, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, I like that," and you know that they haven't really. So it's very, very difficult, because a lot of and also this work we're doing, particularly the work with government, has to go through a process of programming, and then it gets spewed out to lots of people, and you can only occasionally pilot things. So I feel the testing is important. It is difficult to find the right people and to do it well, And there are other things you can do as well as testing to, as it were, be more objective about users. So with the Shell work, I think that was done. It was a bit out of our hands, but that was about consultation, I think, between salespeople and customers. The other thing is with some of these things, and I think Shell's a case in point, the new version is so transformed from the old version that it's either so obviously better that you should just go ahead and do it, or it's so different that there's a bit of a down curve before it starts going up again. And that's quite a classic thing when you make major transformations in a familiar document, that there will be people who won't be able to find what they're used to finding or dealing with it in the way they're used to dealing with it. So yeah.
So after the first like wow effect, then there is a slightly.
Well, it's either wow or what's this? This doesn't look like. In fact, when we first were doing things like the bills, which used to just be computer printouts, and we started doing things with graphics on them and color, the clients were always very afraid that it would look like junk mail and be thrown away. And focus groups would tell us that it doesn't look like a bill. And you have to sort of work through that a bit. And I mean, other things, for example, I was very fed up. We worked for one of the banks, and we designed bank statements which broke down your expenditure into categories. So you'd get a bank statement which didn't just have by date order, but it said we think you've spent this much on food, or this much on petrol, or this much. Here are your top people you've paid to. And in user testing, they all say, I don't need that. I don't want that. Well, now it's absolutely standard to have that with the new digital banks do that all the time. And you think, well, perhaps we were just a bit too ahead of ourselves. And the users kind of said, no, don't want that. So the bank didn't do it. And we could have been doing that in 2004 or something. And yeah.
You were ahead of your time.
Well, yes. I mean, I think probably not the only ones, but yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Hey, to finish off, I'd like to ask, what would you say to someone who's watching and interested in getting started with information design? How to get started? Well, I know the information design summer school is one place, but
I think there are some books on it. For me, I think it's to start looking at information critically. So one of the things right at the start of the summer school, there's another plug, we ask people to come in and to bring with them, a document that they've had, which we ask them to bring in a good one and a bad one. And it's very hard to find a good one. And it's quite easy to find bad ones. But then we want you to explain why you think they're good and why you think they're bad. What is it about this document that I don't understand? It's because this arrived in the post today. It doesn't tell me what it's about. It's a survey they want me to take part in or something. But it's not. It's all over the place. And so start critiquing. Start being critical at everything you look at. It's easier to do that when you've got some principles to go by. But for example, if you are in the world of contract design, go to the World CC contract pattern library, immerse yourself in that and look at the example. So drill down to the example, not just the pattern. Because what patterns do is to explain why things are as they are. And so then you can, when you take your good design, I'm trying to find one on my desk, and I can't. But when you say this one is a good design, what is that thing doing there? What problem is that solving? So try and reverse engineer a document to try and work out what were the motives for the designer or whoever's writing to you for putting that there in that place with those words. And for them, I think the problem is they want me, this has come with a product that I've bought, and they want me to go online and leave a review. So the problem they're trying to solve is people aren't bothering to do that. So they're giving me a little friendly message, reach for the stars, get it? Stars, reviews, to engage me in doing that. And perhaps they find it works. But that's the kind of way you should be thinking about this. Why is this not working? Why is this working? What problem are they trying to solve? And you're kind of on the way there. And then you have to think about the tools that you have at disposal to do that.
Oh, that's brilliant. Brilliant advice to start looking at how the information is presented, not just the information itself that is in the document. Hey, thank you so much for coming today. Where can people learn more about you if they want to find you?
The first slide had it, www.
Yes.
Simplification Centre, spelt the British way, RE at the end, simplificationcentre.org.uk, or my own website is robwaller.org. And then you can, go from there if you want. But thanks very much for having me. I'm sorry I can't see people, but I hope somebody's been listening.
Yes, there have been people listening, right. Definitely. Okay. Thank you so much for coming, and thanks everybody for watching, and have a great day. Bye-bye. Bye.